Today we're going to be doing a really fun project. I am going to show you how to make a tube that will stand up. And you're going to need a few things that you might not think of besides your normal sewing stuff. At least one thing. Let me get it to show you. You're going to need a soda bottle, a 2-liter one, of any kind. It really doesn't matter what kind as long as it's not tapered in here. It needs to be flat in the middle. And what you're going to do is you're cut it here and here, remove the label, and then cut these sections into strips, which I have already done. There's 3 of them. One of them my helpful children cut, so it's been taped. But you'll get about 4 to 6 depending. I can't remember if this is 1 soda bottle or 2, honestly, but you want that. And you want them roughly 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters in thickness, right around there. They can be a little bigger, a little smaller, doesn't really matter. Now, the other thing you need to know is some measurements. So I have measured our plastic circle, and you want to cut your fabric roughly 13.5 inches or 34.5 centimeters. I know those aren't exactly the same, but they're fairly close. And then you're going to cut it by the desired length that you want your tube. So we're going to do that. I have a bunch of this purpley eggplant colored fleece, so we're going to use that. I wasn't kidding when I said a bunch of it. And you're going to want to cut out 2 of these. So I'm going to line up my edges. Make this super long today. I think I'm only going to cut it the length of my board, which is about, the board's a little longer than 23, but I'm going to cut it about 23 inches in length. Now we have a nice rectangle, and what we're going to do is we're going to sew it into a tube. So I want this to be my outside and this side to be the inside, and you can see one side's a little fluffier. I hope you can see. Yeah, this is less fluffy than this. That's why this looks like a different color almost. So we're going to make that the inside. So I've folded it right sides together. I'm going to pin it along this edge, and then I'm going to sew it. So I'm going to sew this. I gave myself a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so I'm going to sew this one at 1/4 inch because 1/4 and 1/4 equals 1/2, and that should make it so that the tube will fit inside it pretty well. The fleece is a little stretchy. It does not like to cooperate when there are pins in the fabric, but it will be kind of a snugger fit so that the tube will fit inside. So we're going to sew that on a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so we've got our tube, and I'm not going to turn this right side out just yet. Actually, no, I'll go ahead in a minute. I always tie my threads in a knot. Now, for the second tube, what you're going to want to do is actually sew it a little further in because it needs to be smaller than this. It's going to go on the inside. So we're going to sew it at about a 1/2 inch seam allowance instead. going to tie a knot. Grab the thread. And I just want to mark that this is the one for the inside, so I'm just using a pin. If you have a safety pin, that works. Whatever, just so that I can tell the difference. Okay, now I'm going to take these two things, my pins and my scissors, and go back to the table. All right, so now we have our 2 layers and we've got some tubes. For this project, I'm going to use 2 of those tubes, and I'm going to use this. Now, we also want to make it so that, well, okay, so first thing we're going to do is turn this right side out. So then I turn this first piece right side out, and then I trim the extra fabric off of the seam allowance above where my sewing line is, just so there's not as much bulk when I put the 2 layers together. Then I put this new trimmed piece inside the other one, and I'm lining the seams up, which is what I showed you right there briefly. I'm just making sure everything's nice and smooth and not bunched and even. Then I'm going to put my rings in. I discovered if you fold it just a little, it pops right in, and then you can let go and it'll pop out. Then I start pinning right behind that little plastic tube so that it doesn't slide while I'm sewing in the next portion of the sewing machine part. All right, then what I'm doing is folding the edges under towards the inside so that the seams and raw fabric is going to be on the inside of the project. And I'm folding it under about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters. It's not perfect. I don't measure it. I just eyeball it all the way around. And I folded it in one spot, and then I went directly across from it and pinned there, and then tucked it under so that the sides matched up. So that's what I'm doing here. You'll see I've done this now in between the pins on one side, and then I do the same process on the opposite side. All right, so that's pinned. We're going to repeat this process on the other side, and all I've done is just added a couple of pins to hold the little plastic circle in place. You can see though that once we stitch it is going to stay open. So it's a circle, bend in the middle, curve it, but don't pinch it. Just hold it loose so that it's like a heart. See that? If you don't pinch it, it'll pop right back open. And this part doesn't have to be perfect because it's just holding this so it doesn't slide too much when you sew this end. We'll deal with that later. Okay, now we're going to take this back to the sewing machine and we're going to sew this edge. So in this clip, what I am doing is pushing the plastic ring all the way to the edge of the fabric as best as I can. And I'm sorry, I filmed this really weird. I apologize. And then I'm using pins to hold it in place, just kind of pinning them next to it. And then you're going to see me do this all the way around. And then the step I am sewing around the edge of the fabric on the opposite side so that the pins can come out and the fabric stays tucked under, just like I did on the previous side. As I'm going, I'm taking pins out. This is a little bulky, so it was easier to take the pins out while I went. Go back to my starting point, reverse stitch a little, and end the thread. And then once again here, I am pushing the ring to the edge of the fabric tube and pinning it in place so that it matches on the opposite side. I think I put my pins about 1.5 to 2 inches apart as I went all the way around. And then at this point I realized that my walking foot was why I was having so much difficulty with my sewing, so I put my regular foot back on. You do not need a walking foot for this project. I was just lazy and didn't change it before I started, and I was realizing that it was making my life difficult, so I took it out. And then next, I am sewing all the way around the tube, just behind the ring, sort of where we put the pins. So I'm doing that all the way around. It's a little hard to see. I'm sorry. There was not really a good way to film this. Then I clipped the thread and removed my pins. The nice thing was, even with this thick as the fabric and the plastic was, I was able to sew it all the way around, and even if I caught the plastic edge with my needle on the machine, it didn't break. It just kind of made a funny noise, and I was able to guide it back off. And I'm repeating this process on the other side. Just continuing the same thing where I'm sewing all the way around. I did try not to sew on the plastic, but you know, this isn't perfect. The rats don't care. That's kind of my motto in life, is rats don't care. So I just went ahead with it anyway, as is. And then I'm pulling my threads. This is me threading it in a needle and then pulling it to the middle. I'm doing the same with the other thread and pulling it to the middle. And then I'm going to tie the threads in a knot like I always do when I'm sewing, and then clip it very close to the fabric. So for a no-sew version, we're going to do 17.5 inches, or roughly 44.5 centimeters by desired length. So I'm going to cut it the exact same length that I did before, but just adding those extra inches for the tying. So let's do that. So now I have 2 pieces of fabric, and I'm actually going to go ahead and fold these in half. And I'm going to fringe the top, and I think what I'm going to do is cut about 1.5 inch fringe. And of course, because I thought I would be cool, I did not measure or mark this fringe. I just eyeballed it. And that worked out mostly fine. It was fine for the top at least, but I should have marked it when I got to the sides. That was just my little note. I really should have done that. Didn't think about it. All right, now I've got 2 pieces, and what I did is I separated them, and I am knotting each one individually. Each side, I should say, individually. So here I am doing that, tying a million knots. And this is where, as I mentioned in that little note on the previous clip, I should have made the ties just a little bit longer. They were a little bit hard to knot. I had a little bit of trouble with this, and I feel like I have pretty good dexterity. So I would definitely recommend making the little fringe taller, just so that it's easier to tie in the full knots. Okay, then what I did is I just gently kind of stretched it a little bit, because when you tie knots like this in the fleece, it bunches up a lot, and just stretching it every few inches helps to kind of pull it back into shape a little more. So that's what I'm doing here. And it's still a little tighter at the top. That's okay. You'll see in the next part what I did to fix that. So here I clipped every other tie for this inner layer, and I wish I'd done this for the outside. It made it a lot easier and it didn't bunch up as much. So here I am just cutting off every other piece, tossing it into the pile on the side of my desk, because that's what I do. And then I start the process of tying a million ties again. And oh my goodness, like I said, this definitely works, but oh man, sewing it's way faster. I feel really badly for those of you who do not have a sewing machine. I would definitely recommend some sort of inexpensive one for simple projects like this. You don't have to be perfect at sewing to make projects for your pets. They do not care if you can sew a straight line or not, and it's really worth the headache being gone to do that. So then here, what I did is I took both layers and I shoved one inside the other. Yep, that's what I'm doing, shoving one right inside the other. And I made the mistake of not lining up my tied edges. We'll call those our seams for now. I did this on one side, but then on the other side I did not. I thought it would be easier to tie it that way, but I was 100% wrong. Oh, also I scrunched the top layer back, and then I folded this ring in half just a little bit, didn't crease it. And when you let go, it pops open, and you can pull your fabric right over top, and boom, it's in place. Perfect and easy peasy. So then I just was fixing my layers so that it wasn't all bunched up, which would have been better if I had lined up my seams like I was talking about. Then I folded it and popped open, and then I folded it again, and boom, inside. There you go. That's all situated now. And then I'm kind of maneuvering the fabric again, just making sure everything's nice and tidy, not super wrinkly, and lining up my edges there so that I can trim my fringe. And so here I'm trimming the fringe for the edge here, and also trimming, yeah, see there, I'm trying to line everything up, and it's just giving me a little bit of difficulty because of those seams not being lined up. But I didn't know that at the time, so I'm telling you now, line up the seams. It makes it a lot easier. So I thought I would do like I do when I sew, and do like one half and then tie it, and then repeat on the other center point, and that really didn't make any difference, so I abandoned that later when I did the opposite side, I believe. But now I'm fringing the rest of it all the way around. Here we go, trimming my fringe. I had some that were like really funky shapes because I didn't line it up very well, which is why I really should have measured when I was cutting my fringe. So I'm just going to apologize that I'm having to voice over this whole thing. I know it's a little awkward. While I was working on this, my kids were playing in the background, and my husband came up to have a conversation with me about, I don't even remember what, because I actually filmed this like 2.5 weeks ago or so. So as a result, I have had to do voiceover for this whole video, and I'm sorry. I know it's awkward. I'm not very good at voiceovers. I'm not good at keeping a running commentary, but I appreciate that you're watching anyway so that you can make cool stuff for your pets. So here I am finishing up the edges, and I just stretched the fabric out again like you see me do for the long part. And now I'm going to repeat this on the other side. And yes, I did change the two seams to match up on this one, which was a much smarter thing to do. Yep, and here I am making the fringe all the way around. I lined up both fabric pieces and cut through both layers while I did this. And then I just picked a spot and started tying a million knots again. I will say, even though this is a lot of knots and tying, it didn't really hurt my hands or anything. It is a lot, but it didn't take very long. I think I sped this up 3 times as fast as it is in reality. And the whole video is 20 minutes only because I did 2 different versions. So yeah, it's really not that long. It took maybe 15 minutes each tube, maybe, I don't know. I'm not good at math, dyscalculia and all that. But there you go, there's me stretching it out and finishing, and then I just shoved the little ring further in. Now, since this one is no-sew, I don't fasten the ring in place. So that's something you'll need to watch when you're playing with it. But there you go, all done.
Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you dislike it, give it a thumbs down and tell me why in the comments below. I really love getting your feedback. If you make this project, I'd also love to know that. Tell me which one was your favorite. Did you find one easier than the other if you made both versions? All things I would love to know. Don't forget also to subscribe and hit the notifications bell if you want to find out more about our rats or DIYs or the miscellaneous mischief that we get up to. Bye, have a great day.